Hello, welcome. I have several announcements that I am being paid to tell you. Please don't forget to provide feedback. We have short surveys we'll be passing out. We'll collect them up on the way out. All the sessions, including this one, will be posted online by the end of the week. No, by the end of next week. Code.google.com/io. It's also in your conference materials. And join us for an after-hours event on level 3 at 6 p.m. tonight with, booze and stuff. Yeah, we'll try to end early so that you can all get an early start and getting drunk. So I'm here to talk about Google DocType. What is Google DocType? Briefly, it is an encyclopedia. It is a series of articles. Internally, we referred to it as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Web, although obviously we had to pick a different name for external publication. But it shares some of that same mentality. If you're a Douglas Adams fan, you remember Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The guide was vast, broad, deep in some places, very shallow in others. The Hitchhiker's Guide's reference page for the planet Earth was just 2 words, mostly harmless. We have some pages like that are really just stubs at the moment, but we have a number of articles, we have a number of encyclopedia pages, we have a lot of sample code already, we have a lot of test cases already that I'll be talking about in a minute. So this is an encyclopedia of the open web. What does that mean? What is the open web? Well, briefly, the open web is a beautiful soup of barely compatible clients and servers. Comprises billions of pages, millions of users, and thousands of browser-based applications. You can access it with open source and proprietary browsers on open source and proprietary operating systems, on open source and proprietary hardware. Google has built its business on the open web, and we now want to help you build here too. Now, what does that mean? It means that we want Google DocType to be the #1 hit when you, as a web developer, go searching Google or any other search engine for information. You get stuck on a property, you want to know how to do a certain thing, you heard about some security problem, you go look it up in your favorite search engine. We want to be the #1 hit. Now, what's the problem now? Well, the problem now, quite frankly, is that MSDN is the #1 hit for many, many developer-type queries. And there's nothing wrong with MSDN as long as you understand what it is and what it isn't. It's a comprehensive encyclopedia of Microsoft technologies. It's extremely good at being a comprehensive encyclopedia of Microsoft technologies. It is not anything else. And it never will be. We also briefly considered calling Google DocType GSDN. The S didn't stand for anything we figured people would understand. Now, of course, we could take MSDN out of the web results, but first of all, that would be evil. And second of all, people might notice. And third of all, it actually is useful. I mean, if you need to know about Internet Explorer or any other Microsoft technology, it really is the right place to go. But if you need to know about how something works in Internet Explorer and Firefox and Safari and Opera and, then it's not the right place to start. Doesn't mean it doesn't have its place, but we want to provide another starting point that, among other things, points to MSDN, points to the Mozilla Developers Center, points to information on webkit.org, information in the Mozilla bug database, whatever. And third, and I'll get to this a bit later, TDC, test-driven content. Many web reference guides to CSS compatibility or DOM compatibility. They have these huge tables. They have, supported browsers, yes, no, checkbox, X. And if you're lucky, they have a general page describing what it means when they say that, this particular browser is compatible and this one isn't. But other than that, you sort of have to take their word for it. There's no way to drill into that, to those compatibility claims. There's no way to drill in further and see, well, what exactly do you mean when you say that this supports, this particular CSS selector or it doesn't? So I'll talk more about test-driven content. The scope, as I said, is the open web. What is the open web? Well, it's the DOM, as defined by the W3C and a variety, a patchwork of extensions, some of which are being standardized and some of which are just one of those things that everybody knows. HTML, and to a lesser extent XHTML, CSS, basically anything that you can do on a stock version of Firefox on 64-bit Linux, if you want to get specific about it. That means no Flash, no Silverlight, not even Zool, although technically you can do Zool in Firefox, but no browser-specific technologies. It's a fuzzy line. It's a fuzzy line. The exceptions are security and accessibility. Anything related to security is fair game because as a web developer, even if your application doesn't use, for example, Flash, you will need to know certain things about how Flash operates because it may affect you and may, if your users are running Flash, even if you're not actively using it, you may be vulnerable to certain situations. And accessibility, which anyone who knows me knows I'm a bit of a stickler for accessibility. I've written on it extensively. I worked on it for several years professionally at IBM. I worked on Firefox accessibility, adding accessibility features and fixing accessibility bugs in Firefox. So all of this is fair game. One of the things that Google DocType brings to the table that other web references don't, and this is not anything that it's not magic, it's just we're a product of our time, is that we're building this reference as the WhatWG and now the W3C HTML working group, reformed working group, is working on HTML5. For those of you who don't recognize it, this symbol is the symbol of the What working group, which banded together several years ago as an informal cadre of concerned developers and browser vendors. Pretty much everyone except Microsoft. Well, that's what it does. What are you going to do? Actually, the HTML, it's since moved to the W3C, and the W3C HTML working group is co-chaired by one of the tech leads on Microsoft Internet Explorer 8. So they at least have a voice in the process, whether or not they use it or choose to use it. But so, as a product of our age, there are a number of new elements in HTML5 that have been introduced, a number of attributes, a number of things that have been clarified, things that every Ajax developer uses. Inner HTML, which was originally a Microsoft proprietary extension, is now being standardized. It's been reverse engineered essentially and documented as to how it should work. Strange things like the adoption algorithm for misplaced table cells. If you have an invalid page, this is just something that previous HTML specifications never went into. If you have a malformed table with table cells that are not actually part of a table or a table row within a T-body, then where do they go? And the answer is, well, they get adopted by a different node. But the way that that actually all happens is very complicated and was never really, like, no one ever paid any attention. You know, the spec writers of HTML4, who were very good, but they just didn't care about invalid HTML. They were there to document valid HTML. And so the WHAT-WG, the WHAT working group, Ian Hickson and others, were concerned about the lack of interoperability in these little niggly details that affected, you know, not quite valid HTML DOM methods, properties that had been used by everyone, like inner HTML or XML HTTP request, which are supported on every modern browser, and yet no one quite knows how they work. That's not a good thing. So we're documenting a lot of that. We're working with Ian Hickson, who actually works at Google now. I see him whenever I'm in Mountain View, and working with them to document all of this stuff, as well as the new properties and methods in HTML5. So what isn't Google DocType? Well, I mentioned it's not Zool, it's not Flash, except as relates to Flash security. It's not Adobe Air, it's not even Google Gadgets. It's certainly not Silverlight. Nothing against Silverlight, I'm sure it's very good. I use Debian, I don't have any idea what it looks like. It's not part of the open web. And as much as, I mean, obviously there are Google properties that use Flash. YouTube is built on Flash. No one is denying that Flash is out there, that it's the most, you know, popular plugin ever. But still, this is just, you know, other than security concerns, it's just not what this project is about. Exceptions, of course, security, accessibility, anything related to security. In fact, we have an entire section that I'll show you a bit, some samples of later. We have an entire section on Flash security, including some previously unknown issues. So what is test-driven content? I mentioned this earlier. The basic problem with, you know, every other web reference in the world, there are either large test suites, overarching test suites. I mean, there are test suites for CSS, there are test suites for various DOM properties, there are test suites, but they're not integrated with any sort of reference, any sort of further reading. They're just, you know, here's the test suite, you go to this page, you click here, if it turns purple, then you win, and otherwise you lose. And on the other side, there are these sites with compatibility charts, but nothing to back them up. There's no way to drill into the claims that they make about browser compatibility. So test-driven content was something we came up with early on as a way to describe our goal of a combination of test cases along with reference material, along with articles, supporting content, links to other reading elsewhere, even links to MSDN. Nothing wrong with MSDN. Technically, Google DocType is a wiki, like Wikipedia, like many other wikis in the world. There's a wiki that I just found the other day that's all about Star Wars. It's called Wikipedia. I'm not kidding. I love the internet. So it's a wiki. Anyone can edit it. Anyone with a Google account can edit, and you can get a Google account for free. And just log in and click edit this page, and you can edit. You can add comments. We have comment threads on each page instead of talk pages. If you're familiar with Wikipedia, every page has a talk page where you have unstructured discussion. We have something similar, just more akin to blog comments. So what's the best thing about Wikipedia? Here's my impression. This is a quote from bash.org. Some random 13-year-old on IRC someday got immortalized, and here we are. Here's my impression of Wikipedia. There are 5 fingers on the human hand. Citation needed. We want to have a similar thing in Google DocType. If you add a fact to a reference page, if you make a claim in an article, if you say that something is or isn't compatible with something else, I want a test needed in brackets next to it to back it up. I want a complete compendium of facts, all of which you can click through and prove yourself. What's the worst thing about Wikipedia? The page on the deletion, how to delete an article, is 10 pages long. I am not kidding. Actually, at this resolution, I think it's 13 pages long. This does have a history within jurisprudence that the way to create fairness in a complex system is to have a process for everything, a fair process. There are communities that try to abide by this. There are open source projects that try to put everything up to a vote, have a democratic process, majority rules for every decision. It ends up looking like this. Those are the rules. That's the beginning of the rules. That's actually the introductory page on how to delete an article. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, except that I don't think it scales well. And I think that this is the epitome of why it doesn't scale well, is that you end up with people who know the process more than they know the content that you're trying to create and trying to maintain. And you end up with a small cadre of essentially lawyers, wiki lawyers, who know all the ins and outs of the rules and can use them to play against use them against other people who don't know the rules as well. There are other communities, open source communities, famously Python. Guido van Rossum, who is here at this conference somewhere and now works at Google, has said that the Python community, the Python development community of Python itself, is a benevolent dictatorship. And you can have all the discussion you want, but eventually he's going to make a decision. And recently they have opened it up somewhat with the Python proposal process and so forth. But ultimately, it goes up to one guy. And if he likes it, then it can go in. And if he doesn't like it, it's not going to go in. And if you don't like it, make your own language. And that's the model. That's more of the model that we're shooting for in Google DocType. We want to be benevolent dictators of, deciding what's in scope, what's out of scope, what browsers are listed in the compatibility charts, which has been a point of contention, which we may change our mind on. But we're modeling it more after Python than after Wikipedia. But basically, building a community is hard work. Is this going to work? I have no idea. I honestly don't. I've never tried to build a community of this size, and neither has anyone else inside Google. Well, obviously, people have built it around code, No one has built a collaborative editing environment of this size. And destroying a community is very easy. And I don't know what to say to that, except that I'm benevolent. I really am. But I'm also the dictator. Signs of success so far. Within 2 weeks of launching this, we already have volunteer translations going in Spanish, French, and Japanese. We have, let's see if I have this. Hey, look, no, there's Japanese, there's French, and there's Spanish. Spanish started literally the day after we launched. Some guy came into the Google DocType mailing list and asked a question about, I want to, start creating Spanish translation. How do I do that? And before we even could answer him, actually, I don't know if it's him. It might be her. Before we could even answer them, they just started. And that's great. I love it. We're doing everything we can to encourage it. We internally we're working on some talking about possibly adding features where there can be a more standardized way of getting to the various translations of a particular page. But I don't have anything to announce on that side. But we are, obviously, people want to do this. We want to encourage them. We want it to be as easy as possible and as standardized as possible, so that you can, if you accidentally land on the wrong language, there's a standard way of going to the right language without having to add like n times m links on every single wiki page, which seems sort of silly. Every single person that I mentioned this project to in Google asked, what about spam? Because, we're letting just anybody edit. Well, you can't just let anybody edit. You'll get anybody editing, and they'll want to sell you Viagra, and it really has not been that big a problem so far. It's still early. Obviously, we only launched a few weeks ago. We have had a few comment spams, but very little in the way of wholesale high traffic. Creating 1,000 new pages, each of which looks vaguely like web developer documentation, but actually all the links go to buyviagra.com or whatever. We haven't had a lot of spam problems. We do have some automated processes in place in case it does become a problem, and we have manual processes beyond that. And I don't know. Oh, I guess we'll find out. One of the things and I was very adamant about this from the very beginning, and got virtually no resistance, luckily, from other people within Google. Licensing is important to me. I mentioned I run Debian. There's just a bunch of licensing freaks who decided that they wanted to run some software. But that's just secondary to the fact that it has to all be the right license. So one of the reasons that we can have these multiple translations into Spanish and French and Japanese and whatever else somebody decides to come up with is that all of the content is licensed under Creative Commons. To clarify, it's always important to ask which Creative Commons license, since there are lots of them, and not all of them are necessarily as free as you would think in terms of open source and free software. But we're using specifically the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 unported license, which is essentially the BSD license, but for text. It's not viral, it's not country specific, it doesn't restrict commercial use or reuse, it doesn't restrict modification, it doesn't restrict redistribution. It's the good one of the two good ones. All of the code, I mentioned there's sample code to go along with the articles. All of the code is under the BSD license. which is non-viral, is just straight BSD. We didn't make up our own license or anything. There's no tricks, no traps. It's standard Creative Commons 3.0, which is the latest version, attribution only, nothing about, founder's license or non-commercial or no derivative works or anything. It's just Creative Commons BSD. That's it. And what that means is that you can have things like a Spanish translation that doesn't need to ask our permission to start a Spanish translation. We've essentially given permission to create any sort of translations. One of the other important pieces of creating an open encyclopedia is data portability. And to that end, just because of the way Google DocType, it's hosted on Google Code, Google Project Hosting, same as any other project you could start yourself, which means that it's backed by a Subversion repository, which in turn is backed by Bigtable, which in turn is replicated like 12 times around the world and is relatively stable and all of that. And it means that you can use standard command line or GUI tools or whatever you want, Subversion tools, to check out a copy of the entire encyclopedia. That means all the code, all the tests, all the articles, all the reference pages, everything. The only thing it doesn't include at the moment is comments, and we're working on that. So you can get all the content that I put into it. You can get all the content that you put into it. You can get all the content that the Spanish speakers, translators, and such put into it. And you can keep it up to date if you want to publish it on your private intranet. If you want to take it on the plane with you, you can do whatever. All this stuff about offline AJAX tools. This is not an application. It's just a bunch of content. And you can check it out of the Subversion repository like you can check out any other open source project, period. The other thing, which I will personally be working on shortly, is that because it's openly licensed and uses standard, Creative Commons licenses and BSD licenses, I want to be able to say apt-get install Google DocType, meaning that you can get a weekly snapshot or monthly snapshot of the encyclopedia as a package and install it locally through your package manager. That means, having zips, archives for people who want to manually download it, who aren't necessarily conversant in Subversion, or packages, Linux distribution-specific packages, RPMs or DEBs or any other, type of packages, to be able to install this and then, of course, update it automatically through your, if you have one of those system-wide package managers. One of the things that this will require is open sourcing the WikiRenderer script, which is just a Python script which takes the wiki markup that you actually type in and which you actually see in your directory if you do SVN checkout, and convert it to HTML in the same way that the wiki software does. And we will be open sourcing that Python script as well, so that you can say apt-get install Google DocType, and you can get a pre-rendered HTML version of it instead of just the raw wiki markup. Progress so far? Well, we have over 75 articles. We have over 2,800 pages of reference documentation. Again, some of that is, it covers a broad spectrum. Some of it is very deep, some of it is very shallow. We'll be filling in the shallow parts to make them deeper. Some of the pages are nothing but stubs and a link to, a single compatibility test. On the test front, we have 10,000 test cases, just over 10,000 test cases. and they're, as I said, linked in with the relevant articles and reference pages throughout the encyclopedia. How can you help? Well, as I said, it's a wiki, so all you have to do if you want to help is log in with your Google account, and you'll be able to edit any page, create new pages, as the translation teams have been doing, creating new pages with their language prefix and then the wiki name of the page, and adding links between pages to their individual translations. There are a lot of gaps. I will be the first to admit that there are fewer facts in this encyclopedia than there should be, and there are fewer facts than there will be tomorrow and the next day. If you have facts, that's great. We like facts. If you have tests, that's even better. If you don't, please add the little test needed. If you find bugs, someone at one of the WebKit developers at Apple found a quite severe bug in the listing of some of the compatibility tests. The tests themselves were correct, but all of the results were inverted. Very embarrassing, but easily fixed. And we have an issue tracker at one of the tabs along the top here. Yeah, issues, click on issues, and you can, I don't think I have internet access at the moment, but you can, add a new issue just like any other open source project. What do we have? Well, we have, as I said, we have about 75 articles. We have a number of things on cross-site scripting, introduction to cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, everything you ever wanted to know about cross-site scripting attacks, and then particular examples, filtering user input in tag attributes, how people try to break out of tag attributes that contain user inputted data, and what you can do about it. Filtering user input in regular HTML text, in JavaScript event handlers, HTTP headers, JavaScript context, meaning if you have a script block which actually contains some text that you get from the user via a submitted form or a URL parameter. And similarly, for style blocks for declaring inline CSS, if you have specific user colors or whatever that you're including, that you're reflecting back in in your response page, filtering user input in URL attributes, cross-domain data disclosure attacks. Google has had some of these previously. The most famous one listed here was that you could get a list of, I forget the exact attack. I believe you could get a list of someone's contacts without permission by accessing constructing a particular URL and calling Gmail. E4X, which most people don't even know about, which is a way in Firefox to include inline XML within script blocks. And it's something, as I said, that's supported in Firefox out of the box, and so you need to be aware of it if you're creating pages where you might have user input within a script block. Generally, compartmentalizing applications into different subdomains and different domains. UTF-7, the case of the missing char set, which I think is a really fascinating example of how deep you really need to know this web stuff in order to prevent attacks on your site. The problem is it's a combination of factors, but basically in certain browsers, Microsoft browsers especially, but even other browsers, if it sees a particular substring within the first 512 bytes of your HTML page, it will decide that the entire page is in a particular character encoding, which no one actually uses, which is called UTF-7. And it will then render the rest of the page as if it were in that character encoding. The problem with that character encoding is that it can include scripts. Let's see. I can make this bigger. If you can have encoded script elements and other, malicious JavaScript inclusion that doesn't appear to include any of the usual markers like angle brackets or ampersand LT and so forth, because it's encoded in this strange UTF-7 character encoding. And if Internet Explorer or other browsers see this type of string within the first 512 bytes of the page, then they will actually override their previous guess of what character encoding the page was in, and then you are vulnerable if your page includes things like this, which otherwise you wouldn't even know to filter out. Again, malformed UTF-8, another very deep character encoding type of bug, where you can inject a string in the UTF-8 character encoding, which is widely used as opposed to UTF-7. Inject a string with invalid bytes, bytes that are invalid in the UTF-8 character encoding. Depending on the specifics of the server-side processing, these invalid bytes may cause the next character to get skipped, which means that if that's at the end of a string and the next character was the ending quote of an attribute tag of an attribute value, then suddenly you can break out of the attribute value and do things like add your own on-click handlers or on-event handlers. Very nasty stuff. Anyway, these are actual problems that Google has had. We've since fixed them, we hope. We've since fixed them, but these are the sorts of problems that we've run across running on the open web, on HTML with browsers, the multitude of browsers, some of which we like and some of which we don't, and all of that is irrelevant because someone is going to use them, and if we're vulnerable in that browser, then we're vulnerable. It's the weakest link is always the problem. So we have a multitude of articles, security articles. We have an entire section on Flash on Flash security, as I mentioned, and various common cross-site scripting vulnerabilities that can affect Flash, as well as some notes on how Flash parses what's called cross-domain files, which allow Flash content to access resources on another domain. And it parses it very liberally, and you can run into problems if someone can upload a file onto your site that will be parsed as a valid cross-domain.xml file by Flash, and then they can reference that from another site and actually do things like steal cookies and execute script in the context of your own domain, even if your application doesn't use Flash at all. So this stuff is important. So we make an exception, Flash stuff, because everybody has Flash. Then we have articles that center around code samples. We have a number of articles around what we informally call the Google Standard Library. It's a collection of open source, now open source, code that runs a number of large Google properties. Part of it is used in Gmail, some of it is used in Google Docs, some of it is used, actually I'm using Google Docs right here, so I'm probably using some of this code in a minimized, packed form. But we have the unpacked version with actual, comments and white space and real names. And, we have code walkthroughs, and we have, here we go, code walkthroughs and talking about, the tricks and pitfalls of dealing with multiple browser issues, cross compatibility issues. And we have, stuff about the DOM. We have stuff about CSS. We have stuff about weird stuff about how to, how to install styles dynamically into a page. Obviously, if you have, if you know in advance what your styles are going to be, you can include them in a CSS file or in an inline script block. But if you need to inject a style block. But if you need to inject a style block into the page at runtime dynamically from JavaScript, how do you do it? And the answer is, well, it's complicated. But there is a way, a combination of ways, which will work in all browsers and will be performant in all browsers. And we know what it is, and now you can too. Style. User agent, which, starts with a standard disclaimer that you shouldn't ever rely on the user agent. Unfortunately, there are some obscure edge cases where you really do need to, and some of these code samples will show you, there's just no way to programmatically determine whether you're dealing with a version of Camino or Safari that has a bug in the box model object for function, and you just have to look at the user agent because it doesn't expose its at a granular enough level, it doesn't expose enough information any other way. So with that disclaimer aside, of course, you need to occasionally detect the user agent. How to detect Flash, which, again, is one of those things that lots of sites need, and there's 1,000,001 code snippets out there. We think this is the best code snippet. It's, as it says in the comments there, it's derived from Apple's sniffer, but actually goes a bit further. Goes all the way back to Flash 2 in some cases, which is probably overkill, but and then we have a number of, as I said, a number of reference pages like this one on the screen.colorDepth property, which talks about all the different little quirks and things in various browsers and various versions of browsers. And then this is an example of the compatibility chart. You can click through to see the actual, this is a very basic test. It just checks whether the property exists, meaning whether type of screen.colorDepth is undefined or not. But you can click through in any browser and see the actual test itself and see the code that underlies that. This is a very well supported property, nothing controversial, but we have thousands of other pages like that where you can find small differences between browsers. One of my favorite examples is, I don't think I have it up here, but one of my favorite examples is we have a page for each CSS color keyword, things like white and black and yellow and Alice blue and papaya whip and all these other random keywords that no one ever uses, and everybody laughed at me when I had like 147 tests for CSS color keyword. Oh, you're just padding, just because you want to say you have 147 more tests. No, actually, we found 2 bugs in WebKit Safari that had been there probably since since they forked off from KHTML, which means they were in Conqueror before that on Linux, and So there are a number of places where we have tests that really no one has ever done. I mean, it was a simple thing. I think the color keywords, they were supported, but they ended up being a different value. And it was like, instead of an 8, it was a capital B. Like, literally someone typed it in, and they just, like, were reading it off a list, and they just typed it wrong, like 10 years ago. And I found it. I was very proud of that. Anyway. Yes, and here's Spanish, and here's French, and here's Japanese. And it seems like every time I wake up in the morning, we have a new translation going. I think someone's trying to start a Chinese version as well. So that's all how you can help. If you know anything, we have a number of articles already that people have written. One of them that just went in yesterday was how to get Internet Explorer to recognize unknown elements. Which came about through a comment on a blog from in an unrelated conversation, and is now one of the primary methods that people are using to get Internet Explorer to support new. They're writing compatibility libraries, similar to some of the compatibility libraries that Dean Edwards has written to get Internet Explorer to support various CSS things and other properties that it doesn't support. This is a way that you can get Internet Explorer to support unknown HTML elements, which means that you can build a compatibility bridge, a compatibility library, so that you can start using HTML5 and some of the new elements in HTML5, and they will act. They will be displayed properly. They're treated as block or inline or whatever, and have default properties in Internet Explorer. And someone wrote up that article and pointed to the blog comment just yesterday. And that's it. code.google.com/DocType. It's alive. If you go there, you can see a little flash video of me talking about this, and we'll also put this presentation up there whenever it's available next week. And then you can click through to start browsing the Encyclopedia of the Open Web. That's it. Are there any questions? Can't see. Okay, yes, I see a hand. Stand up. Oh, wait, we have a mic. Go to the mic.
Hello.
Hello.
What about things like CSS image sprites and those kind of techniques that are those kind of things that you are thinking about including?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, look, I have an update. Whoa. You turn off everything you can, and it's just not enough. Yes, CSS image sprites, absolutely. A great way. Obviously, Google cares deeply about performance. Much of the sample code that you can look through is wacky and strange and has different code branches for different browsers because there are, tricks that you can get that'll make something order 1 instead of order n, but only in one browser, so you have to try something else first and then check, and blah, blah, blah. And CSS sprites, meaning using one image that actually contains multiple unrelated images in it, and you can pull down the image and then use CSS background position and background image and then absolute widths and heights so that you only see one portion of it. But that means that you can have a whole bunch of images on your page without having that number of calls, HTTP calls. That's absolutely the kind of article we want to write or that we would love to see contributed. Yes, over there.
I have a somewhat broader question, whether you've given thought either in this context or in other contexts to distributed content. The Wiki model has distributed editors but centralized content.
Yes.
Except for hyperlinks.
Right.
You showed an example of source code with editorial comments interspersed. And I'm wondering whether you've thought about taking test results or source code or other content that's potentially copyrighted and can't be brought in verbatim into this website, but maybe you say, well, I know with XML you can do secondary markup, but perhaps with JavaScript you could, on the client side, insert elements into the DOM so that you could pull some content from another site into the user's browser and show this service's comments about what's on Microsoft Developers Network or something like that.
I see where you're going with that.
I think it would be very helpful to have inline comments with some stuff from Microsoft or something.
No, I see where you're going with that. The question was about pulling in other content from other sites instead of just, we have sample code, which is part of the trunk of this actual Subversion repository, but pulling in a comment, maybe source code from other sites, and then commenting on it inline. We don't have plans to do that. Well, I will tell you, along that line, we do have plans. Currently, the way that we're pulling in that source code is somewhat suboptimal. We're actually duplicating the source code in the wiki page, and so we have to maintain it in two places, in the actual trunk and then also in the wiki page. So as we make changes and update the code, we need to change it in multiple places, which sucks. Sorry, it's beta.
Well, if I could
but
just
we do.
The main problem is copyrighted content that you want to comment.
Yeah. No, the problem with pulling in content from other sites is that, again, you have licensing issues, potential licensing issues, potential sourcing issues, and it's not really a minefield that we want to step into. We're going to make it easier to pull in code that is stored elsewhere in this repository within this project, so that we don't have to duplicate, maintenance. But as far as pulling in code from anywhere else, no, we don't have plans to do it. Yes, over here.
The Kaha group did a lot of work in cross-site scripting attacks and documenting them.
Say again?
The Kaha group.
Okay.
I was wondering if you had any plans or you had already finished integrating their research into Google DocType.
We looked at a number of different sources of existing, compatibility tables, existing articles on security and other sources. We ended up not using any of it, partly not because, we felt the need to build everything from scratch. I don't think we contacted that group specifically. We contacted a number of other authors who had existing content that they might be willing to merge, and we could never come to any agreements on licensing terms and such. But I'm not opposed to the idea. If they want to bring the content in themselves, obviously licensing it similarly under the Creative Commons license, they're free to do so. We're not opposed to reaching out to groups like that and getting sort of wholesale imports of good, high-quality content. But we haven't worked out anything like that yet. Yes, question?
How frequently is your test matrix updated?
Whenever we have new browser versions coming out, we've had two major updates since we started the project. One for Firefox 3, which of course we'll have to update again when final version comes out. We sort of kept it up to date with most of the beta versions as they came out. Obviously IE8, which was a surprise to virtually everyone outside of Microsoft. And we had to, add a new column. Basically, whenever there's a change in the browser, marketplace that we think might affect the test results, we'll try to keep it up to date with, even minor versions of like Safari just came out with 3.1, and as Firefox 3 goes final, we'll update it. All of the Firefox 3 columns with the latest, just in case there's any last-minute bugs that affect the test results.
And with the scale of their test suite, I presume you have some kind of automation. Can you talk a bit about that?
Oh, yes, I would love to talk about that. I forgot to mention, I said we have 10,000 test cases, and they are all runnable through JS Unit, which is a testing framework, a unit testing, framework for JavaScript. And there are various index pages within the. I need to write up a page about how to do all of this so that other people can replicate it. But there are pages within the test directory that you can load up to say, I want to, run all the HTML tests, and it will go run all of them and give you an output of all the results for a particular browser. And we use that. We have automated processes, virtual images of things that we go, and I can just click a button in North Carolina from my home office, and it'll go off and run all the tests on all the different browsers and feed me back the results. So it's relatively a painless process to go update all those charts as we add new tests, or, of course, as the world adds new browsers. Any other questions? We have 3 minutes left. We can all go get drunk. All right, let's all go get drunk. Thank you very much.